Welcome to the Side Hustle to Small Business podcast powered by Hiscox. I'm your host, Sanjay Parekh. Throughout my career, I've had side hustles, some of which have turned into real businesses. But first and foremost, I'm a serial technology entrepreneur. In the creator space, we hear plenty of advice on how to hustle harder and why you can sleep when you're dead. On this show, we ask new questions in hopes of getting new answers. Questions like, how can small businesses work smarter? How do you achieve balance between work and family? How can we redefine success in our businesses so that we don't burn out after year 3? Every week, I sit down with business founders at various stages of their side hustle to small business journey. These entrepreneurs are pushing the envelope while keeping their values. Keep listening for conversation, context, and camaraderie. Today's guest is Don Kennedy, the CEO of Convoy Road Coffee Roasters. Don's husband, Mike, received a roaster and some beans for Christmas in 2020, and after tasting his coffee, Don bet him she could sell it on Facebook. It worked, and now has transformed into their own roastery. Don, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on here.
So I'm excited to have you on. I don't know that we've had that many or not any coffee roaster people on the podcast. So hopefully we'll get to dive into some kind of the nuances of coffee roasting. But before we get into that, give us a couple of minutes about your background and what got you to where you are today.
So I'm Don Kennedy. I am an attorney, actually. CEO is like my second job. I'm also an author and a podcaster. And I am somebody who has touched a lot of industries over the years. I enjoy business as a whole. And given the opportunity to start another one, that is exactly what we did. So I have a military background. So does my husband. We traveled a lot, moved around a lot, and put our roots down really starting when our kids were in high school. And we've been back in my husband's hometown for about 7 years now.
That's awesome. So a lawyer as well, background wise, has that helped you at all in terms of starting the business? Like what kind of law do you do?
So I'm a business law attorney and also it's some administrative stuff, which was actually very helpful because what we do is food production, manufacturing. It's pretty highly regulated once you get past a certain point. So coffee, interestingly, starts out as what you would call a cottage food, meaning you don't need all the licenses, but to become a business, you do.
Got it. That's interesting. So I wonder, like, your perspective on that. It's funny because my first startup, one of my co-founders was a lawyer and it saved us an incredible amount of money in legal fees. Do you feel like it's helped you out in that way? It saved you money?
So I actually am from that old adage, right? Like somebody who uses himself as a lawyer's a fool. So we didn't use ourselves for necessarily like legal things. We have a business attorney that we use, but we did get the benefit of being able to research different things and the right questions to ask. So where I think it saved us was more in the money of implementing all the regulatory things because we didn't make a lot of mistakes. Like we knew ahead of time what we were going to have to invest in and the licenses we were going to need.
Oh, that's interesting. So you mentioned this is an opportunity to start another one. So this is not the first time you've started something entrepreneurial?
No. So we actually had a consulting business way back in 2011, and we did that for a couple of years and did really well. We enjoyed it. But my husband had a near fatal accident in 2013, and we actually lost a business, had to kind of dig out of all that and, reset ourselves. So this business, Convoy Road Coffee Roasters, we started it in 2021, and it's kind of the comeback story, if you will, particularly for my husband, because this is his passion.
Yeah. That's interesting. I'm glad things are better now. But it probably puts things in perspective when things like that happen and you've got to come back through that. What are some of the lessons that you took with you from that first, could have been successful, but because of outside forces, ended up getting shut down? What did you take from that into this new business?
A couple of different things. One is, you don't know what you don't know, right? So we had taken a lot of courses and we had done some things and we thought we knew what we were doing, but we didn't know certain things like what is key man insurance, right? we didn't know those kinds of things because those aren't really discussed for startups, right? And it's just not part of that basic SBA training thing. I don't know that it needs to be, but it wasn't. So we didn't know that. And risk mitigation, risk management is something that we are much, much more confident or conscious of now, where, you know, we look at our bottlenecks and we predict a lot faster where things could cause issues, I think last time we were probably like a lot of new startup entrepreneurs is just growth without understanding capacity and things like that. And, you know, we're much, much more aware of that today than we ever were before.
Yeah. That's an interesting kind of comment, because I think you're 100% right. Anybody starting a business, like, you can start asking people about what you need to do, and there's always something that nobody tells you about. I remember my very first startup. Nobody had told us that we needed a business permit. We opened an office. You know, we were in an office and we were just typing.
Yeah,
We rented the place but nobody told us that. And we had never started a company before. What did we know? The only way we discovered this is when the Better Business Bureau guy came by to sign us up for free and asked us where our business permit was. And we were like, it must be in the mail.
Yes.
And that day, my CFO went and got us a business permit, because what did we know, right? And nobody had told us. So it was an oversight because of a lack of understanding. So I think you're exactly right in terms of that. So let's talk about that then. In starting this, okay, this is your second kind of go around. You learned a lot the first time. You realized there was a lot you didn't know that you didn't know. Was there anything else that made you nervous in trying this out the next time around?
That's a great question, because as you said, you know, probably haven't had other coffee roastery people on here. Lots of people open coffee shops and they do really well. The margins, obviously, on a cup of coffee are much bigger than, let's say, a bag of beans. But generally speaking, the biggest thing that we had to take away was making the decisions up front of how we wanted to do this. And I did not want to get up at 4 a.m. and make your coffee any more than I wanted to get up at 4 a.m. and make my coffee. So some of our strategic decisions and the things that we decided we wanted to do were based on the fact that we had done this before. We worked ourselves to the ground last time, and we weren't going to do that again. So we decided, you know, manufacturing production is sort of where we wanted to go. And I don't think we asked ourselves any of those questions about what could this look like if we make it a business the last time.
Right. Yeah. That's an interesting analysis there. Not wanting to get up at 4 a.m. and make coffee. I'm with you on that. So then how have you kind of managed this in terms of life, and how do you work the business? Because I think you mentioned that this was and still is maybe a side hustle. So how do you think about that? Well, or maybe it's not a side hustle anymore.
Right. So we have 5 employees. We're in grocery stores. You know, we focus more on the wholesale side because of the fact that it's manufacturing and production. But we're only open to the public a couple of days a week. We're very, very clear about what we do. Our lines of revenue are very distinct. We know who's managing what and doing what. But going back to your question about how did we kind of maybe put our toes in the water this time, I can tell you when we first started doing this, even though the market research was clear, there weren't a lot of other roasters and stuff, we leased our first roaster because I was too afraid to buy one. And I was like, I can write it off 100% if we don't do this well. And, you know, those kinds of things.
How much does a roaster cost?
Depending on the roaster, they start between 7,000 and 9,000.
Okay. Yeah. That's a not insignificant amount of money.
No.
So it got started like that. So just you and your husband at first, or were there other people involved?
Nope. So the very first thing, he was roasting a pound at a time on a tabletop roaster. People really liked it, and we were doing really well. And we were basically tripling sales every month. And about 4 or 5 months in, we were like, we need to make a decision. Yeah. And it was very, very funny because my husband and I, we had just started getting our packaging and stuff done a little bit. We were kind of dipping our toes and seeing if there was really going to be sustainable demand. And so people would he would meet people to deliver the coffee to them, or they would pull in the parking lot and he would meet them outside and, and I was like, I hope that the sheriff knows this is just coffee.
I had visions of like
signs up. We didn't have a commercial roaster. We didn't have any of that. And we were just making the sales. And
out of the back of the trunk that has all the hallmarks of a illicit deal of some sort.
And we had the proper labeling that the USDA requires. But other than that, I mean, we really, when I say we started little, there was capacity, 1 pound at a time. And then he got a second roaster who's doing 2 pounds at a time. And it takes so many minutes. And he started getting to the point where he's roasting, a couple days a week, sometimes for 10 hours.
Wow.
And he used to laugh at it. He's like, well, I push the button, I hit the timer, and he reads a book or whatever. And he was like, this is so bad. But we started tripling. So the demand started growing. And then we had somebody say, could you put that in my store, in my deli? And so I was like, maybe there is more here. And we need to look at that. So
how did people find you, or how did you find the customers initially? And how did that growth end up happening?
Yeah. So we found the customers originally on Facebook. And, the product is very
so it
good.
wasn't just the first sale that you did. It was like all the sales.
We sold 11 bags on that first post, and I only had like 5 of them to sell. Yeah. So we have our own profiles. We do single origin. We don't flavor our coffee. It's all kind of medium. We have a medium dark. So we have a profile that's a little different. We don't do espresso roast or Italian roast and things like that. So it was something different in this area, and people just really liked it. So the profile itself, or the coffee profiles and stuff that we were doing, people were like, oh, this is great. I can drink it black and it's not bitter. And that's kind of how that started going, is we were very, intentional about, no, we're doing this. If you want French vanilla, you add it yourself, or if you want pecan, whatever. So we offered something that was different, and there were no other roasters in the area. So that gave us a chance to kind of educate people about the roasting process and stuff. And they were interested, and it did just start kind of growing organically. Our first year marketing budget was $35.
$35. That's probably a pretty good ROI on that.
Yeah. That was our first year. But we went to events and we did tastings, and we have a philosophy that you shouldn't buy something until you've tried it. So we didn't immediately just package it up and sell it. We went to events and did tastings, and people could choose the ones they liked the best. So we did it a little differently. A lot of roasters that you'll see like online, they roast and go straight to e-commerce. And even though they probably get a lot more sales that way, I'm always like, well, what if you don't like it?
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So I'm going to admit something. I'm actually not a coffee drinker. Yeah. So I don't know too much about it. So I'm going to start asking you questions that are probably well known for coffee drinkers, but I'm going to be the dumb guy here in the room. So what exactly is specialty coffee, like and what you guys do? Like, why is it so different and in demand in the area that you're in? You talked about how there's nobody else doing this roasting. Has that also changed? Are there now other roasters near you? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, there are some who are near us, and there are some people who white label, right? So they have their brand on freshly roasted coffee. So specialty coffee actually is, in the industry, anything that has scored a cup score 80 or higher. And anything that scores a cup score 79 or below is considered commodity coffee. There's nothing wrong with it. It's the Folgers and the things that you see on the shelf. But specialty coffee particularly is harvest to harvest. So you can have a small grower that gets an 81 this year, but next year gets a 78. So they're not eligible to sell in the same tier the next year. So we actually forget sometimes that it's an agricultural product. It is available 24/7 on the shelves, but we do focus on the smaller farms. We focus on the smaller harvests. And sometimes we even get what you would call a micro lot, where maybe a farm has done 1,000 pounds and you have to, grab your share. So we do focus on the higher cup score coffee. So there actually is a distinction in the industry.
So, yeah, what is it that kind of dictates that score? Is it And who's doing that scoring?
Yeah, so there are certified coffee cuppers. That's what they're called. And they're evaluators. And just kind of like the wine guys, they go out in the field, they brew up a sample of the harvest, and they cup it. They grade it. They grade it on acidity, mouthfeel, flavor notes. There's different things. I'm not a cupper. And also, I don't have that palate. So I know that sometimes I like one particular origin over another. But if you were to, say, did you get those blueberries? I'd be like, absolutely not.
I definitely know what you're talking about. I've never tasted the, time in things and things like that. I'm like, nah, I'm just gonna have it. Okay. So, this is super interesting to me. So you kind of talked about, working with these farms and micro lots and things like that. So are there a segment of farms that you already have relationships with, or is that changing from year to year? Like, how do you develop those relationships? How do you make sure that you are able to grab whatever it is that you need to grab?
Right. So we actually, I didn't really misspeak, because we do work with the suppliers who have the contracts with those farmers. So we have all the information about who the farmer is, how many acres, the elevation and stuff. We actually, as roasters, do not import the beans directly. And there's some, guidelines around that. But we have some phenomenal suppliers that have built these relationships over years. And, we can work with them and say, listen, we're looking for something from here. Or they'll give us a listing of what they call a float coffee. So they have contract relationships. And they'll say, we have this, coffee from Finca San Josefina, which is a single farm. It's a single farm, and it may be a number of acres, but that is like the one place that it comes from. So we just work with our suppliers very closely to make sure that we're being mindful. We love sharing the backstory. We have a concept called Origin of the Month. So I probably should have started with that. So we do bring in one new, unique, exotic kind of fun coffee every month. And, the growth has allowed us to, because originally we didn't have these relationships. We were too little. We weren't ordering enough. We were tiny. They were, the first time we bought a 135-pound bag of coffee, we were ecstatic. But we ordered it from East Timor. I had to look at a map. It's a little island north of Australia. Yeah. And they grow coffee. And we wanted to try it. Yeah. So we got big enough to basically tell people, we're tasting the perfect cup. Come on the journey with us. And we'll bring in different things if you'll share with us this packaging, because there's no way I'm going to let this guy order 135 pounds of coffee for us to drink at home.
Right. Yeah. So interesting. So, okay. So you started with selling 11 bags, even though you only had 5. How much are you now processing in terms of pounds of coffee a month, let's say?
About a half a ton.
Half a ton.
So we have 2 roasters going now. Wow. And depending on the month, we're going into 4th quarter soon, so it's going to go up a little bit from there. But we can put through 2 ton or 1.5 tons, I think it is, a month through our little baby roaster. So we do 3-pound small batch. So, but we'll add roasters if we need to.
Right. So right now you've got capacity. You can still grow with the roaster that you've got. And so then I imagine this is running during just Monday through Friday? Like, what's the business cycle like for you?
So we're only open to the public on Wednesdays and Thursdays.
Okay.
Legitimately, the rest of the time we roast. We can do over 100 pounds a day. So we don't have to have them roasting 24/7, 365 to make our current demand. Okay. So I almost am embarrassed to say we roast probably 20 to 25 hours a week, and being production, we can do it anytime, day or night. Once you roast coffee, it has to rest 48 to 72 hours before packaging. So sometimes we'll roast on a Saturday if we don't have anything else going on. Right. The way that we do it is everything is computerized. And so once we get our roast profiles set to make sure the quality is consistent, we just roast that particular coffee at the same roast profile consistently. So we don't have to stand there and watch it. It's almost, it's almost we're working hard, but not that hard, if that makes sense, in the roasting section of it. Because
Right.
we let the roasters do the work.
Right. So all the hard work is on the front end, and then it just does its thing.
Yes.
So do you have like any kind of approach or a way that you think about um, the business and the quality of the product, and how do you remain competitive? Because now you're saying like there are other competitors in your region. Do you think about it as from a price point or a quality point, both of these, something else? Like, how do you think about that to maintain it for yourself?
So one of our big, distinguishing factors is the fact that we bring in these origins of the month that may be small batch limited edition that aren't going to be available forever. We have some standard coffees that we love and we keep around in stock, but we don't deal at all in like flavored coffees. We have somebody here in town that will give you a butter rum or a Highlander grog. And I think that's amazing. We just don't do that. So we differentiate there. We also are mostly on the wholesale side now, quite a bit in grocery stores. So we build relationships in an area. We'll go into an area. We'll do some events. We'll do some tastings. We'll be supported. And then once people start asking for us to ship a certain amount of coffee, we will approach a grocery store, maybe an IGA independent grocer, and work with them and put it on the shelves there. So we distribute that way. And so we will then promote that store to our customers. So we do a lot of that organic brand recognition first, and we'll move into an area with a lot of intention that if you really like us and you want to keep buying us, why would you drive all the way to where we are? We're just going to put it over here. So we have a 50-mile radius, and then we have a distributor in another part that has a 50-mile radius. So we're just very intentional about doing that. And then we figure we have two kinds of coffee drinkers. The ones who just like something that is consistent and they can rely on every morning and they drink our blends. And then we have the exotic coffee drinkers who are like, no, I'd really like to try something from a country that I have to look up on the map, like Sulawesi, for example.
Right. So interesting. So it's been 4 years now, basically, on this.
Almost, yeah.
Coming up on 4 years.
Right.
Thinking back, like when this all started, is this where you thought you would be in 4 years?
No. So not only was it not where we thought we would be, when I posed the question to my husband, is this going to just be a hobby or do you want to buy our first roaster? We wrestled with that because we remembered what it was like to own the other business and then to lose it. So we actually had to overcome a lot of mindset and limiting, thoughts and fear over certain things. And I think in some ways that has helped us do this very intentionally. So I didn't think we would be this successful, I guess, at year 3 or 4. But really, it was year 1 and 2 where our revenues just about doubled. And I went, wait a minute. This is not going to be just a family little thing where we're just going to, roast and have this. And it was an intentional decision to then build the business. So everything from this point, I think it's not that we're expecting it to get this big. It's we've decided to go ahead and put that work in. Yeah.
What was the annual revenue mark where it was like, oh, this is a real business? Like what dollar amount made you think that?
So our first December, we did 17,000. And in the, 6 months of the year, we did 61,000. Like from tabletop roaster to December 31st, we did 61,000. We went, wow. Then the next year, we just about doubled that. And we went, okay, so we're over 6 figures. And then we started having to get employees and things. And we went, okay, there really is a demand and our brand is doing well. And no, I don't think we want to stop.
Right. So it very much sounds like the market forced you into having this be a business. It wasn't really like something that you thought that would happen in the beginning. And you've ridden the ride so far at this point.
So far, yes. And you're right. I think if we hadn't been selling as much as we were in those first 3 or 4 months, I would have been like, well, that's cute. That is a side hustle kind of thing.
Right.
Whereas, it became something where it was like, oh, there's no more hours in the week for us to get on those little tabletop roasters.
Right.
So we have a decision to make.
Did the two of you shed anything when you made that decision to go kind of all in? Were there other like hobbies or jobs or things like that you were doing that were producing revenue that you got rid of?
A little bit. I was consulting and working a little bit more as an attorney. So I backed off of those a bit. I'm kind of scaling them back up a little now because after the time investment we've made, a lot of this can operate without me necessarily being there all the time, right? So my job at this point is to empower, train employees, manage, the resources, if you will, resource people, and hold the vision and kind of guide the ship. So it did scale back for quite a while, but now it's I'm not saying it's running automatically, but it's doing a lot more of that.
Yeah.
So, again, it's production and manufacturing. I don't need a barista to make lattes, which makes a difference. It really does.
Yeah. 100%. Okay. So this is obviously a family affair. You and your husband are kind of in this. Let's talk about boundaries and what kind of boundaries you set up, because it's easy for us as entrepreneurs to let business blend into all parts of life. And do you let that happen or do you not let that happen? And what do you think about in terms of those boundaries?
So my husband is the Roastmaster, and he is like the brand ambassador, and that's his role. So he doesn't actually do the business side. I do. After his accident, he had a traumatic brain injury. And so these are the things that really kind of give him some things to do. But his absolute zone of genius in this business is to get those roast profiles correct, to spend time researching the beans, researching the farms, and roasting to the cup that is, in a taste profile for our brand. And after that, pretty much I take over, which has been amazing. So we try really hard not to let this consume us. We have strict boundaries around, when we're going to stop talking about it or timeline. Very intentional about doing, strategic planning 90 days at a time. And this is what we're sticking to. So trying to manage shiny object syndrome. So we do try to make it so that it is not all consuming. My daughter does marketing and my son manages, he has a background that allows him to help inventory management. So they come in here and there, I'll call them, but we don't talk about it at Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah. The challenge though is with the product you make is that all it takes is having a cup of coffee at a meal and you could slide right back into talking about business.
Right.
Because you're consuming your product, I imagine.
Right. Well, we do. We like coffee generally. My husband was stationed in Panama in 1987. And that's really when he discovered specialty coffee. So he's been chasing this for over 30 years. But instead of me paying, $65 a pound for some obscure thing, now I make everybody, share with me a big bag. But
I love it.
Yeah, coffee has been a big part of our life for over 30 years. Before we ever started the business.
Yeah. Okay. One last question for you. If you could go back in time and do something differently in the business, what is it and why?
I think I would have managed our marketing a little bit better when we first got to like that first fourth quarter kind of thing. I don't know that I would have gone any faster because there was a lot of mindset, confidence, boundaries, and things that we had to learn about what we could do in the business based on past experience. So I don't know that I would have gone faster about getting licenses or, those kinds of things, because you have to have the licenses to be able to ship out of state. There's some rules around that. I don't know that I would have done that faster, but I definitely, once we got those licenses, I think I would have had a little more confidence to ramp up sooner if I had known where we would be now.
Yeah, I love it. Dawn, this has been absolutely fantastic. Where can our listeners find and connect with you online?
So if you want to learn about the coffee, we have all of our past origins and all the great stories around that. That's convoyroadcoffee.com. And you can find everything about that there. You can find me on I think Facebook and Instagram and stuff, and it's just Dawn K. Kennedy.
I love it. Thanks so much for being on today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great chatting with you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Side Hustle to Small Business podcast, powered by Hiscox. To learn more about how Hiscox can help protect your small business through intelligent insurance solutions, visit hiscox.com. And to hear more Side Hustle to Small Business stories or share your own story, visit hiscox.com/side hustle to small business. I'm your host, Sanjay Parekh. You can find more about me at my website, sanjayparekh.com.